After a brutal weekend in Melbourne at the Australian Grand Prix, the Supercars teams have had a few weeks to lick their wounds and fix some fires, and are now on their way to Perth, Western Australia for round 3 of the Supercars Championship. I'm super excited about this one, not only because it means it's time for another round preview here on the channel covering everything you need to know ahead of this weekend, but because Perth is my local round. I'm finally going to get to see these Gen 3 machines in the flesh for the first time. Before we get stuck into the weekend of racing ahead, I do have a short but very important announcement, and that's from sort of early to mid-May this year. The Behind the Barrier YouTube channel is going to be renamed. It's going to be called Fan at the Fence. You can see we've got a new logo to coincide with the change as well. I do want to stress though, this is purely a rebrand. It's just cosmetic. The focus remains on supercars. You'll continue to get round previews, reviews, and discussion videos in between each event from me. I'm much happier with this new name for the channel, but I am a little worried about losing people as part of the rebrand process, so please make sure you're subscribed, and that way you'll get a few reminders about this, and of course, keep getting my supercars content moving forward. But enough about me, let's talk racing. The supercars teams are arriving in Perth, a journey of over 4,000 kilometers for some of them across the Nullarbor. The destination, well, you can pretty much choose to call it what you like. Some of you may know this track as Wanneroo Raceway, most of us tend to know it as Barbagallo, and this year officially it's actually called carco.com.au Raceway. While the name may have changed, it's still the road course we know and love, a bit of a classic on the Australian touring car calendar. It's a short track, 2.42 kilometers in length with just 7 corners. The cars go around here in a clockwise direction, and the risk rating around here I would class as low to medium. You'd be unlucky to hit a wall in this place, but the sand traps are ready to catch you if you do go off. As for a lap around the track, it's a very short blast to turn 1, a medium speed right-hander. Shortly after, you're straight into the S's, which were reprofiled a few years back. As part of that, they toned down the curb up here, which was a bit unfortunate because the cars don't get quite as much air as they used to. Still a great place to watch them go by though. And that leads you into turn 4, pretty much the only serious left-hander on the racetrack, and that leads into turn 5, which is pretty much just a light kink, but with the new Gen 3 machines might be more of a handful. And that leads us onto the second last corner, turn 6, an even longer right-hander, and a very important corner because it leads you onto the back straight, which then takes you down to turn 7, pretty much the main overtaking opportunity on the racetrack, so you want to make sure you're getting the back half of this lap right. If you're heading trackside or watching supercars around here for the very first time, there's 2 main areas I want to bring your attention to as a spot to watch. The first is the S's section, particularly on lap 1. It's very hard to go side by side through here, and it's one of the few locations on the track where there's a real risk of hitting a concrete wall if you do encounter a problem. The second area I'd like to point out is turn 7, the final corner on the racetrack. As I said, a key overtaking location, but it's got a few other nuances to it as well. It's got a lot of runoff on the exit, which can sometimes lead to a bit of track limits controversy, and if you're coming into the pit lane, you actually have to take a very low speed through this corner compared to the other cars, which often leads to tangles and awkward collisions as well. So definitely turn 7 is a spot to watch. Last time supercars were in Wanneroo, we actually had a pretty exciting weekend of racing. Shane Van Gisbergen took the win in races 1 and 3 of the weekend, with Will Davidson taking the victory in race 2. Race 2 was actually a source of a whole lot of drama last year. There was a big crash for Scott Pye down the main straight after a tangle with Jack LeBrock, and when that race actually got restarted after a red flag, we saw a huge track limits controversy with Cameron Waters getting penalised 5 seconds. He was the on-track leader, but that handed the victory to Will Davison. Turning our attention to this year, we've got an interesting format lined up this weekend, kicking off on Friday with just a single practice session of 90 minutes in length for supercars. Then on Saturday, they're going straight into 3-part qualifying, a bit Formula 1-esque with a bit of supercars complications thrown in there for good measure, but at the end of that one, that will set the grid for race 1 on Saturday afternoon. Then on Sunday, we're dropping the 3-part qualifying, just going for straight 15-minute sessions, and those will set the grid for races 3 and 4 on Sunday. Fortunately, the weather forecast seems a whole lot more straightforward than the format. We're expecting sunny skies on Friday, same again on Saturday, and then the smallest risk of rain on Sunday, but it should be partly cloudy. The temperature for all 3 days is going to hover around the 20-degree mark, but I should stress I'm recording this on a Tuesday, so all of this could be subject to change. There's been 2 key championship headlines since the last event in Melbourne, at least in my opinion. The first of which is Supercars suggesting they have until the end of May, that's next month, to get an arrangement in place that will see New Zealand return to the schedule in 2024. I'm getting a little bit nervous about this one now. I really hope they get something over the line, and it sounds like, according to Auto Action, that Taupo might be in the lead to get the race in New Zealand. The other big headline is that reigning Supercars champion Shane van Gisbergen has extended his deal with Triple Eight to keep racing in Supercars. I must admit, I was surprised to see this one confirmed, especially as a multi-year deal, given Shane has expressed some frustrations with the sport over recent months, so I thought he was going to give it a bit more time to see how things panned out and if they improved from his perspective, but he seems happy enough to lock things down, and we're going to have to see if the other 20+ drivers can overthrow him for the championship. Of course, the new Gen 3 machines are one of the key talking points in Supercars right now, and because they continue to evolve from round to round, I've introduced a new segment of my preview show called Gen 3 Watch, where I'll try to keep tabs of the cars as they evolve. The most pressing matter is almost certainly the fires seen at the Australian Grand Prix. Supercars have made a raft of technical changes coming into Perth that I'm not going to go into detail on because I'm not the most technically minded fan out there, but the long story short is that they're confident the issue has been solved and we are going to see the return of standing starts in Perth, which is great news, and hopefully we don't see any more of those issues. Work is also underway to strengthen the Gen 3 chassis. We've seen the teams complain they're taking large amounts of damage from reasonably minor impacts, so these changes should hopefully help with the repairability of the cars. And we've also seen a center of gravity update on the Camaro. This is a parity item. It's a very minor change, only expected to make a difference of about 7/1000ths of a second around Barbagallo this weekend, but nevertheless they are continuing to refine the cars. On the innovation side of things, Supercars are introducing LED panels to the cars this weekend, very similar to what we see in GT racing. My understanding is that in Supercars these panels will be used to display the position of each driver in the race, and I'm really curious as a fan that's going to be trackside how visible these are, and fingers crossed they work well because I think they're going to be really handy for more casual fans especially who might not be familiar with all the driver names. A few other footnotes before I get into my predictions. The first one is that we won't see any night racing for Supercars in Perth this year. I think this is a big shame. I really enjoyed the spectacle of Supercars under lights last year. I like the fact we also had one race in the dark and then 2 in the light. I think that provided great variety for fans trackside, and the crowd numbers for the night race on Saturday seem really strong from what I could tell as well. Obviously, there's a few complications with the time zones and a lot of the viewers being over east, so maybe that's why it's dropped away. But yeah, sadly we won't have any night racing, but fingers crossed the action compensates. Mark Winterbottom, who drives the DeWalt Racing Camaro this year, is celebrating a big career milestone, reaching 600 races in the championship this weekend, and the Dunlop series has also been in the headlines because from Perth onwards, their races are going to be extended and now counted by time rather than laps. Apparently the motivation for this change is to give the drivers more time to race on track and hopefully reduce some of the poor driving standards that have been seeing in the season so far. I, for one, hope we see the usual chaos and carnage though. Okay, some predictions. Now, as I always say, don't take these too seriously. I just like to put these out there for a little bit of fun and then circle back to them in each of my round reviews to see how I went. I nearly got a perfect score in Melbourne, but I hope I don't get a perfect score leaving Perth, because as you can see, it would have meant some bad stuff happened. The first prediction I'm making is that we're going to see a collision in Supercars qualifying, and this is off the back of some pretty scary close calls over recent years where we see some Supercars on hot laps and others on cooldown or warm-up laps, big closing speeds and some very close calls to major accidents on the track. I've got a horrible feeling it's a matter of time before something bad happens here, and fingers crossed it's not this weekend. My second prediction is something I do want to happen, and that's a race close win for Cameron Waters. I think this is heart over head on this one. I felt terrible for him last year losing the victory for that questionable track limits penalty that he got. Depending how you fall with your fandom, you might agree or disagree with that one. But I'm hoping because of what happened last year, he does pick up a race victory. And then my final prediction is that we will see a rollover in one of the categories this weekend, whether that's Supercars or Super Utes or one of the other categories racing. Hopefully nothing serious, but I do make this prediction purely because we have some very deep sand at Barbagallo, or Carco Raceway as it's known this year, and that can often tip cars up onto their side or their roof. Alright, before I wrap this video up, I did ask you guys for some of your predictions going into this weekend, and if you want to take part in these kind of audience interaction segments, be sure to subscribe because I often put up posts like this under the community tab and also some polls that you can vote in as well. But the first prediction here is from Wessar94. He's expecting Walkinshaw Andretti United to bounce back after a pretty rough time in Perth last year. It was absolutely terrible, wasn't it? And they've been there or thereabouts all year so far, so fingers crossed they do right the wrongs of last year in Perth. And the other point here, I think this is a very good shout. Andre Heimgartner could be a bit of a dark horse this weekend. Wessar makes a good point. Brad Jones Racing tend to go well at Barbagallo, and Andre and Bryce Forward actually have also been on pretty good form this year so far. So good shouts there, I think. Mabini Games has also made some pretty extensive predictions here, but the one I want to focus on is about halfway through. On the topic of DJR hopefully having a bounce back this weekend, or at least continuing their road to recovery. Mabini makes the point here they broke into the top 10 at the AGP. They almost got a podium as well. But Perth is that opportunity. If they want to keep that upward trajectory going, surely they have to be targeting podiums this weekend. Then finally, we have one from Chris Croft, who's expecting SVG to school the field on tyre life. This is a really good point, and this was probably SVG's strongest point at Barbagallo last year, winning 2 of the 3 races. He's just a master when it comes to saving tyres, which is so important in Perth because it's a very abrasive circuit, and with the new Gen 3 machine sliding even more than Gen 2, tyre life is going to be a big piece of the equation this weekend. I still hope we see some variety in the results, but I agree, certainly expecting SVG to be up there. As always, it's not all about the main game. There's a number of support categories in action this weekend. Dunlop Series seems to have a strong showing with 27 cars, I believe, tackling the new extended races. V8 Super Utes kick off their 2023 season this weekend as well, and I believe there's as many as 19 Utes entered for Perth. That's the biggest field size we've seen in a long time for Super Utes, so very excited about that. I do miss, like a lot of people, the V8 Utes of old, but since they moved away from the V6s that blew up every other day and these things back to the V8s and stuck some slicks on them, I've really been enjoying this series, so I'm glad to see it's getting some momentum. GT World Challenge Australia is also racing in Perth. A key storyline there is Renee Gracie making her racing return, and the WA Historics are on as well, which is a local club here, but they always put on a good show. Okay, let's wrap things up by taking a look at the state of play in the Supercars Championship. On the driver's side of things, Brody Kostecki, WA boy, continues to lead the way. Chaz Moster is in second, Shane Van Gisbergen in third, Andre Heimgartner doing a quiet but very good job there in fourth, and Will Brown is in fifth. I think this is a big weekend for Erebus, both Brody and Will Brown. They've come out of the gate strong in 2023, and I think if they have a good weekend here, I'm going to have a lot more confidence about their ability to challenge for the championship this year. I would love to see it. And then on the team side of things, Erebus are leading the way as well there on the team side of things, followed closely by Red Bull and Pole Racing, and Brad Jones Racing also doing a good job up there in third. But that just about brings this video to a close. I will be back with a round review on the other side of the action in Perth, but for now, I cannot wait to get trackside and see Gen 3 in action for myself. And despite being trackside, I still plan to do all the usual community posts where you can let me know your thoughts on the events as they unfold, so keep an eye out for those. And of course, please do remember that the channel is being renamed in the coming weeks to Fan at the Fence. If you want to stick around, keep seeing Supercars content like this, I've got some exciting stuff on the way, please do subscribe. But until then, enjoy the weekend of racing. I know I certainly will, and I will see you in the Perth review video very, very soon.